Welcome, everyone. I'm Megan Jandal with the Louisiana Hospital Association. We're glad that you could join us today, especially since we had to reschedule because of the hurricane. We have partnered with Geonetric to bring our members the latest insights and trends in the digital marketing world. But before we begin, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work and dedication, especially during these uncertain times. Y'all are doing a tremendous job, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a few quick constituency group updates. You should have received an email last Friday regarding the new hashtag Wear a Mask campaign that we launched yesterday in partnership with American Hospital Association. We're super excited about this campaign. It includes a PSA and a website with social distancing resources. If you did not receive those emails from us with the information, please shoot me an email and I will send the materials to you. Also, we have been promoting the Louisiana Care Fund. This is the fund that assists hospital heroes impacted by Hurricane Laura and Delta, and we appreciate you all helping us spread the word. The deadline for hospitals to submit the employee forms is Thursday. We will also host our fall program and Pelican Awards next year. We have reserved the Renaissance for November 12th, so if you want to mark that on your calendars as a save the date. However, if we cannot do it in person, we are going to figure out how to host it virtually. Just a quick note, we will open up the entry period to include work completed from April of 2019 to April of 2021. And we will also include additional categories for COVID-19. With the continuation of the pandemic and an uncertain next few months, we want to make sure that we're offering you the support and resources that you all need. So reach out to Michelle or me if there's anything we can do for you or your hospital. Thanks again, and now let's get started. Today's webinar is presented by Geonetric, which is a marketing agency and technology partner that helps healthcare organizations around the country generate marketing results. They offer a suite of services, including website design and development, marketing campaigns, SEO, content development, and much more. Visit geonetric.com to learn more. Now I have the honor of introducing today's speaker, Ben Dillon. Ben is the Chief Strategy Officer at Geonetric, where he helps healthcare organizations across the country use digital to engage health consumers. He's a SHSMD past president and is on the editorial advisory board for eHealthcare Strategy and Trends. Welcome, Ben, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to share this, and glad we were able to get things rearranged after the hurricane. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. Obviously, very scary storm. Today we're going to talk about a survey that we do. We run about every year. This is the 10th survey we've done over 15 years, so annual-ish we call it. Looking specifically at digital marketing in healthcare organizations like yours. So almost all hospitals and health systems, and a little insurance, a little bit of some other things as well. As I mentioned, this is our 10th edition, and it is a huge undertaking. We've got a big team that puts this together, and this is now the 4th year that we've done this in partnership with eHealthcare Strategy and Trends, which has been a really wonderful partnership for us to get this out into the world. We're going to be covering a lot of information today, but not everything that's part of the survey and the survey report. So if you haven't already gotten a copy of this, I encourage you to go out to geonetric.com/LHA, and that will get you a copy of the full report. It is free, and it's a great resource. And once you have it in hand, there are all kinds of ways that you can use it in your organization. Also want to give a quick shout out. We have an advisory board that helps us with this survey, people who aren't part of Geonetric, some folks from within health systems, some people who are more on the agency consulting vendor sides of the world. and really help us to make sure that this is the best survey that it can be and is really reflecting the kinds of questions that people are struggling with today each time that we do this survey. This year in particular, they were really, really helpful in helping us understand when it was okay to actually ask people to fill out a survey. Our original push for this was right as the pandemic was reaching its first peak and everyone was shutting down and things were just kind of a mess. It didn't seem like that was an okay time for us to reach out to all of you to actually spend time giving us this kind of feedback. We ended up doing the survey data collection starting around July, or mostly in July, a little bit before and after. And I think that's reflected somewhat in the results this year. So this year we did ask a couple things specific about the pandemic and its impact on people, but maybe more importantly, there was a lot of things that came out of the questions that we asked year over year and the different kinds of answers that we were getting this year, just sort of out of sync with what we've gotten in years past. That I think is really impacted by this pandemic and everything going on here. Every year we pick a couple of areas to deep dive on. So again, this year we asked some things specific about COVID, some things around job satisfaction, retention, some things around organizations' decisions to move forward or delay marketing, digital marketing initiatives and digital transformation initiatives. Some really interesting things came out of that. We did also do a whole section on intranets, and that was really reflective of what we were hearing as a much heavier burden of communicating with employees during all of this. However, again, just too much information. We did just do a webinar that covers that data and a bunch of other information about intranets and intranet best practices, and you can get that at our website, geonetric.com/webinars. And then we also dug into marketing personalization and content marketing and some other areas that we'll touch on briefly today. So diving in, let's start by talking a little bit about the impact on staffing. And this was literally a set of questions we put in last minute. I actually think I snuck them in the night before we went live, and I'm not entirely sure I told anybody about them until after the survey was out in the world. But at the last minute, we're hearing a lot from, our partners on the clinical side, people in healthcare working with frontline folks, and there was a lot of concern at that point, and I think there continues to be some, about a potential brain drain just because of the strain that this was putting on a lot of staff out there. Organizations saying, looking at their nursing staff, for instance, or some of their front office staff interacting with a lot of people who are either leaving healthcare or in many cases were saying, I'm gonna stick it through this pandemic. I don't want to leave my coworkers in a lurch, but once we get back to some kind of new normal, I'm out of here. I'm done with healthcare. We hadn't heard any of those kinds of things for the folks that we survey, though. And again, these are marketers within healthcare, digital marketers within healthcare. And we started by asking about the current level of work-related stress. We don't have a baseline, so we don't know how many people have, escalated stress in any given week out there without a pandemic. But we, certainly what we're seeing is elevated stress levels with our folks, 46% higher than normal, another 10% much higher than normal. That's not as bad as we thought it might be, though. We thought we might see 30 or 40% that was in kind of that much higher than normal category. So our folks are under stress, but maybe not as bad as we worried that it might be. The good news about this is we're not seeing this additional stress leading a lot of people to say, I'm out of here, right? Only 3% said they were actively looking to leave healthcare now. Another 3% said that they were going to stick out the pandemic and leave at that point. And again, I suspect on any given day, we've got a couple of percent of people who are looking to leave the industry regardless. So these numbers may be a smidge elevated, but not out of band with the kinds of things that we suspect we would see on a normal day. On the other hand, we actually saw 8% of people respond that they're less likely to leave healthcare now than they were in the past. Again, seeing the impact of their work, feeling good about what marketing has been able to do in this very difficult time to engage with consumers and help with people's health and all the things we've been able to accomplish has actually bonded, some people to healthcare more tightly. And then, of course, we had a lot of people who responded to the survey that said that they are committed to healthcare for the long haul or are no more or less likely to leave now than they were in the past. So not a big shift, and maybe actually a little bit more retention than people who might be leaving as a result of this. So one of the things that we look at in the survey overall that is going to be reflected in a lot of the data that we share from here is we don't just share what the overall group of everyone who responds to the survey responded. We do those averages and we look kind of across everything. We found that that's a little bit difficult in many cases for people to make actionable. And so what we've done over the course of this survey, over the years that we've done this, has been to break the group of respondents out into leaders, a group that we call average, and a group that's falling behind that we call laggards. And there's a set of questions that I'll show you in a minute. People are scoring themselves. This is not our judgment. This is entirely self-reported data. But they answer a set of questions about if they're ahead or behind in a number of different functional areas, digitally speaking. We score those out, and based on the score, we either put them in a leading group, an average group, or a laggard group. And again, it's really interesting often to see how leaders are approaching things different than everyone else. We also encourage people when they get that survey book and are trying to figure out how to use the data to go through that list and score their own organization, figure out where they're falling in this distribution. And then based on that, you can see what are other folks who are kind of at the same level that I am doing, how are they staffing, how much do they spend, all those sorts of things. And then if I want to move up to that next group, if I want to move forward, what does that take? And how does my organization maybe look a little bit different after we make that transition, or in order to make that transition to go from a laggard to average or average to leader? We also, for leading organizations, encourage them to look and see what the new priorities are where people are investing, because leaders don't stay put. They continue to move forward. And if you're not investing in the same way that other leaders are, you're going to soon find yourself in one of those other groups pretty quickly here. So the actual question that we ask is this, and we have it labeled performance by functional area, but we really ask, how are you doing in each one of these areas relative to your competition? And it's a range from significantly behind, that we give a score of -2, significantly ahead, we give a score of +2. So that's the range here, -2 to +2, and we average it out. Now there's a ton of data here. So if I just kind of walk through the columns quickly, the first three are the scores for those three cohorts: laggards, average, and leaders. And again, it's not a surprise that leaders score better than average and average scores better than laggards, because this was the question we used to put them in those groups. But that's what those three columns are, that score. The overall is across everyone. What is that average score? And then that last column on the right is the delta, and it's basically the gap between leaders and laggards, the leader score minus the laggard score. And very often this is I think some of the most interesting data. It tells us where leaders are doing things most differently from everyone else. So as we look at this particular question, we see that health systems feel really good in a number of areas, particularly good in social media. Everybody thinks they're doing, above average in social media, which is great. In fact, for the laggard group, it is the only one where, as an aggregated score, they scored above 0. So feeling great about social media, also feeling good about video production and web management, as well as accessibility and digital advertising, which is sort of newly snuck into that top group this year. We haven't seen people be quite as positive about their digital advertising as they were this year. When we look at the other end of the spectrum, where do organizations feel like they're struggling more? The intranet, CRM, marketing automation, and mobile app development. So intranets have been around a long time. Again, we're mostly surveying marketers and communicators. I think a lot of intranets and organizations are being managed by other groups, and they've got a different set of priorities. Marketers often don't feel like those intranets are doing the things they need them to. But some of these are some of those new upcoming technologies where we just admit we've got a long way to go, right? CRM, marketing automation, pretty new. Mobile apps, still in their infancy. Now, those are the priorities for the group overall. If we look just at the top priorities, or the top performance areas, I should say, for leaders, we see that the order is a little bit different. They still feel great about social media. Again, everyone does. But after that, we get web design, content development, web development, and SEO, right? So a different set of things where they are excelling just within their own ranking of items. When we then look at the gap, like where are the places where leaders are outperforming everyone else by the widest margin, We get content development, and actually content marketing is actually content marketing number 2, I guess. And this is a theme that we've seen for a few years, where leaders really are investing heavily in content marketing, SEO. These are areas that really help them execute on everything else they're doing more effectively. Like when you've got a great content engine to feed the website and personalization and marketing automation, social media, like all those things just require a constant feeding of content. When you've got an engine that can develop that content strategic and it's effective, it makes all those other things more effective and easier to execute. So again, the gap areas biggest is content development, where they're almost 2 points ahead of laggers, or again, on a total 4-point scale. That's huge. Followed by content marketing, digital strategy, and SEO. I also highlighted the 2 at the bottom, and they're not the next 2, but I think they're really important for us to keep in mind. Leaders feel worse still about their CRM, their marketing automation, their mobile app development. However, they feel much, much better about those things than everyone else does. So even though they've still got a long way to go, we do see significant movement amongst leaders in some of those sort of new tech stack kinds of areas. All right, let's shift gears here to look a little bit at website redesigns and content management system changes, or replatforming. I sometimes use that phrase as well. Over time, we've typically seen the cycle for website redesigns average around 3 to 5 year cycle. And when I say that, I mean, we might see a 3-year cycle might be a third of organizations who have recently redesigned, a third that are redesigning right now, a third that are in the planning stages. That's on the aggressive side of what we typically see. 5-year might be 20, and then another 20% that have no plans to redesign in the near future, right? So that's kind of how we look at the time cycles here. When we look at what's going on right now, we start to see the impact of the pandemic. A lot of organizations put big initiatives on hold, either because important people didn't have time to give to the project, or just because of uncertainty. If they hadn't actually inked the deal and started it, many organizations just hit the pause button until they got to a place where things were more stable and they understood financially how they were going to be doing, and people were going to have, again, the time to invest in this kind of a process. Only 14% of organizations have a redesign in progress right now, or at least, again, in that sort of July into maybe early August kind of time frame. That's really low from what we've seen. And again, if we were seeing 14, we would say, oh, we're at, maybe a 7-year cycle here for redesigns. And of course, this is an aberration. It's unusual. We have 20% that have completed redesigns in the last year, again, about a 5-year cycle. And again, with the organizations hitting pause on some of these things, that doesn't mean that the urgency to do the redesign has gone away. 30% of organizations in the survey said that they have a redesign in the planning stages right now, more than twice the number that are actually redesigning at the moment. So it's been a very slow year for these kinds of big projects, but we're anticipating next year there's going to be quite a lot of redesign activity as organizations start to get moving on some of these initiatives again. Now, when we look at who is actually redesigning, not maybe such a big surprise. Organizations that are leaders tend not to be in the process of doing a redesign, tend not to be planning a redesign. They feel pretty good about this. They're investing in new capabilities instead of reworking that core. So more than half say they have no redesign plans right now. Another 20% say that they've recently, and actually quite a few average organizations indicate they've redesigned recently as well. The place where we see lots of redesigns happening is amongst the average and the laggards. And these are groups that, either they've waited too long, it can be a number of things, but a lot of it is they want this to help catapult them up into that next stage of things, taking a big step, rethinking things, doing a redesign, rethinking the way they're doing content and presentation, all those sorts of things. Often one of those stepping stones to try to step up in this process. And we also look at replatforming, organizations changing content management systems. And this happens a lot less often than redesigns do. But here again, we see the impact of the pandemic at work. change in the last 12 months, we see 7% who have made that change. Less than half that number, only 3%, are changing their CMS right now. Again, almost always these changes happen along with a redesign, and it makes the project that much bigger. So more likelihood that projects that were redesigned with a replatforming were paused here over the course of 2020. However, we have 15% saying a CMS change is in the planning stages. And again, this means that they're at least evaluating a change of platform as part of the process, and that is a very large number for replatforming in any given year. So if we look at these two numbers together, we see a few things. First off, again, most redesign or most platform changes happen along with a redesign, right? So 97% of organizations that are not redesigning are also not replatforming. It's very, very rare to see that happen. About 24% of organizations that redesigned recently also changed their CMS as part of that process. So that gives us kind of a baseline of what's more typical for organizations changing platforms as they do redesigns. When we look at organizations that are in process now, again, if there was a platforming change planned, it was more likely that they put that project on hold. Only 7% are changing or 7% of those in redesign are planning a change, another 7% are making a change right now. The standout number here is for the organizations that are planning in the planning stages for redesign, fully half of them are considering a CMS change as part of that process. So again, I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of activity here in the coming year. All right, let's talk strategy a little bit more, goals, what's important, what gets in the way of us executing. So we start by asking how important each of these different sort of goal areas are for the success of digital marketing. And in years past, this has been really clear cut, right? The top set of things are patient and consumer related goals. They tend to be clustered together pretty tightly. There's kind of a step down. We get the financial goals. They're pretty tightly banded together. And then there's a step down, and kind of all the other audiences like physicians and donors and things like that are in that bottom group. And we haven't deviated from that a lot, but we have a little bit this year, and we'll point out here in a moment. First off, I wanted to look at how leaders prioritize things. And patient acquisition is really important. And I should say, the numbers for patient acquisition this year were higher than we have ever seen for any answer on this question. Usually they're kind of in the middle of that pack of consumer and patient related goals. This year it's at the top, and it's at the top by a pretty big margin. Last year our top score was like 1.2. This year consumer awareness is at 1.23. Patient acquisition is 1.38. So it's jumped to the top, and in a big way. Again, the data collection was in July and August, as lots and lots of organizations were reopening and trying to get people in. And so filling schedules was a huge priority, and I think continues to be a huge priority, and I think will continue to be a huge priority. But we can see that shift in priorities here coming out of everything that's happened here in 2020. So that's one thing. Now, patient acquisition for leaders, very high on the list, although it's actually kind of number 3, right, very tightly clustered with consumer engagement, consumer awareness. When we compare that, though, to the average group, yes, patient acquisition is number 1, but actually financial metrics are numbers 2, 3, and 4, right? So revenue, ROI, or ROI revenue and profitability are 2, 3, and 4 on that list. And this, again, is one of those things that we're seeing. The leaders tend to have greater visibility to senior leadership. Maybe there's greater trust from senior leadership. And it's not that they're not tracking those financial metrics. They are, and in larger numbers. But they don't feel the same kind of pressure to justify every dollar they're putting on the table from an investment standpoint. They're investing more, again, in the consumer experience as a pathway to success in all the things they're trying to accomplish there. That average group, that next group down, under tremendous pressure to be justifying the dollars that they are spending, and much more so than the other groups. So that was the prioritization, the importance piece. We take that same list and ask, okay, so how well are you able to demonstrate that digital marketing is improving your performance in these areas? When we look at the overall, consumer awareness, consumer engagement, new patient recruitment, those are pretty high on the list. The surprise here is number 4, return on investment. Usually this has been quite low and right in there with the other financial metrics. This year it's really popped up. Organizations are measuring ROI more and more. Now I'm a little bit skeptical because the number for ROI is much higher than the number for revenue and profitability. Not entirely sure how you get to ROI without having revenue and profitability, but the numbers are what they are. We're going to kind of stick with what it's telling us for now, even if we can't entirely explain what's going on there. We look at leaders. We see that there's some areas where they outpace everyone else. And I should have included the Delta column here because that's really what I'm calling out. But they particularly excel above and beyond everyone else in areas of new patient recruitment, community relations, and population health. And again, this ROI number is fascinating, and it really is one of a number of indicators that many more organizations are measuring and reporting ROI than they have in the past. Let's look at these two sets of numbers visually though, because here, and this is for overall, this isn't breaking out the leader lagger cohorts, but the red line is the importance, and the darker red line, I guess, the dark brown line is the ability to demonstrate. And what we're seeing here is similar to what we've seen in the past. Profitability and revenue, biggest gap. Not that they're the top items in terms of importance, but just the difference between the importance and the ability to demonstrate is widest there. However, ROI is usually right in there to fill out the top 3. And this year it's to the bottom half because that number for ability to demonstrate has come up so much. Beyond that, organizations are good relative to importance at reporting on things like fundraising and consumer engagement and awareness, and they do struggle more at reporting on profitability and revenue. And to some extent this year, we're seeing patient satisfaction and consumer experience as well. So many areas where we've got some good opportunities to continue to improve our ability to measure and report on what's important. We dig in as well to specific features of websites, and it's not an exhaustive list of everything you have, but there are a lot of things that we sort of have stopped asking about year after year. This year, though, when we look at the overall importance of things, top 2 items are provider directory and online bill payment, right? Core capabilities, and that's pretty consistent with past years, right? That ability to do some basic transactions are important. This year, though, those next 3, really interesting to see them pop up that high. Patient scheduling with new patients and current patients, and of course, video visits has been much lower down in years past, and we've seen it kind of explode over 2020 and then take a step back as a lot of in-person stuff has continued again. Towards the bottom, we see some of those items that we saw some challenges with before, but chatbots, online chat, virtual assistants, even things like mobile apps, some shiny objects there, but by and large, the majority of healthcare organizations not considering them particularly important. Now, leaders consider many of these items to be more important than everyone else, and leaders are kind of that dark brownish red line. Here we see that appointment scheduling for new patients is one of the areas where they've got a particularly large gap in terms of the perceived importance. Physician ratings and reviews, again, something that's become more and more important over the years, particularly important for leaders. CRM integration and personalization, which is actually the item that had the single largest gap. Leaders are far ahead of the game from a personalization perspective relative to everyone else. Now that question, the question that we use to score that, actually doesn't have give me on a 1 to 5 scale. We've got kind of words that went along with it. And the top score area, we called competitive differentiation. That was the top importance option. And so we also looked at this just as what items do organizations feel are the competitive differentiators? And again, appointment scheduling, video visits, were our top three and by a wide margin. So you can see, they were 3, 4, 5 before. They are items that are not just of high importance, but of the highest importance for the largest number of healthcare organizations. As we kind of work our way down the list, though, there's a couple that I wanted to point out, and really the reason I included this slide. Mobile apps, chatbots, live chat, they were way down at the bottom in terms of the overall score. And they don't have the largest number of organizations saying that they're competitive differentiators. But these are items that are either critically important, things that organizations are investing in because they see the potential to differentiate their digital offerings in the market, or they consider it not important at all. And in a lot of cases, it's really, I am investing in things like mobile apps, or we really have no investment whatsoever in the area of mobile apps. And that's where that gap is coming from. So while many have wide ranges of opinion, some of those shiny new objects are either love or hate at this point. As I mentioned earlier, we did ask about how the pandemic was impacting digital marketing initiatives and digital transformation initiatives. So starting with digital marketing initiatives here, we were seeing anecdotally organizations kind of doing a lot of different things out there. We wanted to get a sense if there's a pattern, and the pattern is all over the map, right? So we really, we mostly are falling into two different camps here, right? So we have organizations that for one of many different reasons are delaying or canceling digital marketing initiatives in 2020, 41%. Could be financial, could be, again, attention, ability to spend time on it, could just be general risk areas and circling the wagons in order to make sure that organizations aren't doing anything that's going to be difficult for them to finish executing on later, things like that. 41%. We do, however, have almost a third, 31%, that said, we've actually added and accelerated our initiatives, right? That this crisis, the communications intensiveness of it, other things going on in the space, has lit a fire under a number of organizations, and they've pushed on the gas as a result. And I should point out the little purple wedge in the upper left that says unsure. When you go into the verbatims there, they're really saying, you know what, the other wedge, I should say, they're really saying, you know what, we are accelerating some and we're slowing down others. Reprioritization. It's changed some things, but they're not clearly in the accelerating or slowing down camp. We asked the same thing for digital transformation initiatives in a similar pattern, little different mix of stuff. 35% saying digital transformation initiatives are being canceled or delayed. Almost equal number, 33% saying it's added or accelerated. So again, we have two very different camps, and they're reacting to the crisis in different ways. Small number of reprioritization, a lot of uncertainty here though, right? So we haven't sped up or slowed down yet, but I'm not sure we're not going to do one of those things. And so we had a decent number of unsures in there as well. All right, when we talk about what's important, we also like to talk about what is getting in the way of execution. So we asked, what are the barriers that get in the way here? Overall, these things actually grouped pretty tightly in terms of priority. But when we look at the overall scores, lack of internal buy-in was number one in terms of challenges that organizations feel like they're facing. The inability to measure effectiveness or ROI was number two. Interestingly, though, leaders are feeling some of these problems much less than other groups, right? They are getting more sophisticated at navigating some of these challenges. This has not always been the case because leaders tend to be pushing boundaries more and getting out ahead of things more. They often are actually have greater challenges in some of these areas than organizations that aren't pushing those boundaries as much. Case in point, in past years, leaders have really been the only ones who have had major issues with what is number three on our list here today, the inability to support online transactions with offline operations. And what we mean by this is things like, if you're going to do online appointment scheduling, like it's easy to put the form online, but you need to get all kinds of stars to align within your organization operationally to actually support when someone picks a time and clicks a button, right? In the past, leaders had a lot of challenges. They still have some challenges, but they're in a better position there than actually the average group, which is maybe just starting to hit more of those challenges now. Lack of internal buy-in, another important one here. And again, leaders are getting more effective on this. The laggards are feeling this in a big way though. Because they haven't got that buy-in, it is really restraining their ability to access resources and move forward in the way that they need to. And I talked about these already a little bit. All right. When organizations said that ROI, or the ability to demonstrate ROI, I should say, number 2 is unable to measure effectiveness or ROI. When organizations said that they were having challenges there, we asked a follow-up question, which was, what is preventing you from demonstrating ROI? Every year, lack of tools and infrastructure is the number 1 item. Right? You know, even with more, CRMs in place, even with a greater sophistication in marketing tools and maybe finance tools as well, this is still a major barrier to organizations being able to measure this in the way that they want to. That said, the interesting one to me is number 2. And 50% of organizations that say they're not measuring ROI say that at least part of the reason why they're not measuring ROI is because no one is asking for it, which is fascinating to me because it seems like the talk about ROI is constant, but it turns out that in many organizations, they're not getting that pressure. I always encourage organizations that are in that boat to be proactive and go after chasing this anyway. And I encourage that because, and I think we're feeling a lot this year, organizations being asked for the first time to justify their investments based on their ability to return more dollars than they're spending. And it's not a case where you can easily say, okay, I will start measuring that now. At the point when someone asks, they really are expecting you to deliver a number to them. And so we have seen organizations more anecdotally being really challenged to deliver ROI to justify things they need to justify today if they haven't been in the practice of measuring ROI over time. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, look at budgets. Leaders do spend more than average organizations who spend more than lagging organizations. And that's true in absolute dollar numbers, and that's true in terms of the percent of their overall marketing budget spent on digital. However, they all fall, the 50% point falls into the 21 to 40% range. But laggards, it's pretty close to that 21 range, closer to maybe that 50%, or I'm sorry, the 30%, halfway between the 21 to 40% margin. We see a small number of organizations that are spending big, 60%, 80% or more of their overall marketing budget on digital. Some of those organizations that are just very aggressive digitally, mostly it's organizations that are very small. They just don't have the budget to split and do a lot in the offline world as well as the online world, and they're opting for the online world. None of the organizations that indicated they were leaders fell into that kind of number range. However, they didn't get above a 60% number. We also ask how organizations expect their overall marketing budget and their digital marketing budget to change in the coming year. This was fascinating. And again, it is the pandemic and the shutdown and all of the things that have happened in 2020. This year, more than 40% of respondents said their overall marketing budget was going to be decreased in the coming year. It's not to say that I'm just not saying that their budgets are going to be cut by 41%. It's 41%, 41.5, whatever percent of organizations that responded indicated a budget cut in the coming year. That is just entirely different than any number that we've seen over the years that we've done this survey. We've seen some years where there have been decreases in this number, but nothing coming close to what we're seeing in 2020. In comparison, we are also seeing a cut to digital marketing budgets, but only about half as many organizations. So about 1 in 5, a little more than 1 in 5 responding organizations saying we are planning to have, or we're expecting to have a smaller digital marketing budget in the coming year than we've had coming into this year. For context though, we get a couple hundred responses every year. We've never seen more than a handful of organizations that were cutting digital marketing budgets. This is a number that's held steady or grown year over year during the entire course of the 15 years that we've done the survey. 20% is, again, just an entirely different number than we've ever seen before. Now, leaders are the, for overall marketing budget, leaders are the least likely to be decreasing their budget. They're also the least likely to be increasing their budgets. And again, they tend to have larger budgets to begin with. For digital marketing budgets, leaders, much smaller group that are actually cutting the budget. However, it's also the largest group that's potentially increasing their budget. So they are being more aggressive in digital, even if they are being less aggressive in their overall marketing spend. And we see that as we cross these things into one table. So we look at the overall, all of the organizations that are increasing their overall marketing budget are also increasing their digital marketing budget. Not a big surprise there. All of the organizations that are decreasing their digital marketing budget are also decreasing their overall marketing budget. So, you know, we don't have anyone who's increasing overall digital spend or overall marketing spend and not digital. So it really is, we're cutting, and in many cases, the story we're hearing is our organization is taking a haircut across the board. And it's just impacting everything, right? We're hearing that kind of thing. That's much of what we're seeing here. The interesting thing is we see a lot of organizations that are continuing to shift dollars from traditional to digital, right? The overall marketing budget's decreasing. The digital marketing budget is holding steady though. The overall marketing budget is remaining the same. The digital marketing budget is increasing, those sorts of things. And we've seen that kind of pattern for a long time. I actually think it's accelerating a bit in this year when there's some overall belt tightening going on. And of course, everyone wonders what organizations spend. This is an average. We have some other numbers that kind of break things down by bed size and stuff like that. But overall, on average, between or without staff, organizations are spending $700,000 on digital. Leaders, it's over $1.25 million. Laggards, it's about $450,000. The question I always get around this one is, are leaders just bigger organizations? And they are somewhat bigger, but it only explains a small amount of the delta between what leaders spending and laggards spending. They're legitimately just more aggressive about what they're doing in the space, and it shows. All right, let's look also at staffing and team structures. Overall, we've seen this move in the last couple of years where the majority now of digital marketing groups, or the ownership of that, lives within an integrated, centralized marketing organization. We still see quite a few standalone teams, but there's generally been this move to look at this as another set of channels and to coordinate more closely between the overall marketing organization and the people who are deep in the digital side of marketing and outreach. Team sizes, and we'll break this out by, you know, how many bodies in which place here in a moment. Overall average, a little more than 13 staff members on a team. Laggards, it's about 8 people on the team. Leaders, it's more than 19 people on the team. And again, this is fairly representative of the kinds of things that we saw with spend as well. Now, in terms of how those FTEs are split out, you know, we ask the question this way, and then we do the math to get to those numbers. The big areas across the board where organizations have the most staff are in general website management, content development, social media, and video production. When we look at the areas where leaders are investing the most above and beyond where other people are from a staffing perspective, other organizations are from a staffing perspective, content development, again, plays large here. So almost a full FTE more in content development. Content marketing is high on that list, as is digital strategy. Again, another priority that we see coming up over and over again amongst leaders, digital advertising, and project management as well. The single area where leaders invest the most staff or have the most staff is content development. And they're the only group where content development is more staff than any other area. And again, as we talked about before, this is the tide that lifts all boats. When you've got great content development, content marketing, some of these other things in place, many, many other things on this list are more effective and easier to execute. Now, when we ask what do you expect to increase staff or decrease staff in the coming year? Same list of items here. When we actually, each one of these numbers is looking at the net increase minus decrease. So, if some organizations say they're increasing and some decreasing, we subtract out the decreases. So it's not to say that, we're going to see a 13% increase in marketing automation professionals, but we're going to see that many organizations that are going to be investing more in staff in that area. So the areas that are kind of your hot jobs for the coming year across the board: email and marketing automation, video production, CRM, digital advertising, website management, and digital strategy. However, the breakout as you look at the different cohorts is wildly different. Leaders are hiring a lot in digital advertising, digital strategy, mobile app development, and SEO, right? So very different list of things. Digital advertising has been an area that's been very successful. We're seeing a big increase in investment in a lot of different ways by leaders in that space. We see, again, I mentioned digital strategy before, we're seeing a lot of investment in digital strategy here in the coming year. Mobile apps, again, an area where leaders are struggling, but they consider it to be important, at least a number of them do. Another area where we're seeing more staff. The average cohort has a very different set of priorities. A big investment in CRM and marketing automation. Not something we see in the leaders, but it's something we saw in the leaders over the last several years. So the leaders have staffed up, they've got the CRMs in place in a lot of cases. The average group is heavily into the adoption there. They're still working on some of those things. They're also investing in digital strategy. They're actually investing in intranets a little bit more than leaders, but again, it's sort of a scaling thing. And then content marketing as well. Laggards, again, a totally different picture here. Video production, website management, content development, again, they're behind the curve there, and CRM. We're seeing many organizations there starting to look seriously at CRMs and look at how to adopt that as well. We also look at outsourcing. We ask the question in terms of how much of the effort in these areas is being outsourced. It's a little bit hard to represent without having a whole lot of different slides. So we've kind of said, okay, what are the major areas of outsourcing for the organization? And it gives us a pretty clear picture of kind of what's going on here. The big areas where we see the most outsourcing is web hosting, web development, digital advertising, and web design. The areas that are most commonly in-house: social media, project management, and intranets. And just like we looked at staffing changes by functional area, we also looked at non-staff investment changes by functional area. Some of these are similar, some of these are a little bit different. Digital advertising, again, and you see that leader number there is huge number of organizations increasing spending on digital advertising, video production, web design, and marketing automation. When we look at those leaders, again, digital advertising is huge. Video production is actually very big as well, along with business listing management, not really one that we saw in-house. This is something that we're seeing outsourced more often. Digital strategy, more staff and more spend in that area. And again, non-staff investment is a combination of platforms you're investing in, software you're buying, outsourced services, a variety of different things. I want to contrast that a little bit with laggards, just because it's such a different picture, right? Video production, again, pretty popular here, but they're looking at more investment in web design, marketing automation, and actually CRM. And again, we are seeing fairly big uptake in CRM by laggards. Leaders are expecting to spend more there. Interestingly, as we saw a moment ago, they're not adding staff. And again, talking about CRM, the average cohort has apparently done a lot of investment in CRM, but hasn't staffed it up. So again, interesting patterns as we look at the different elements of this. There are a couple of items that aren't getting more spending. In fact, across the board, we're actually seeing a small cut in spending. That's things like analytics and project management. Interesting kind of observation, not entirely sure what to make of that one. So we've covered a tremendous amount of ground here, and thank you again. The full report, if you go to geonetric.com/LHA, that is available for free. We do have a couple of minutes left if we've got any questions from the group. Just kind of expecting Megan to come on. Alrighty. Thank you so much again. I'll just leave this slide up here for a couple minutes. I don't think I can see if anyone submitted questions on my view of things. So thank you again. If you have any questions, you can either send them through the group or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @BenAtGeo, BenAtGeo, and I'll be happy to take up any questions and we can get on the line and talk through any challenges or anything that you need a little additional insight in out of the survey data today.
Thank you, Ben, so much for this insightful information. We really appreciate you presenting the findings.
My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions from the group, then I think
I didn't see any questions in the chat, so
okay.
I think we're good. So they can download the information with the link you gave us, and then they're also, I believe, going to send a copy of the recording of the webinar as well.
Yes, yeah, there will be a copy of the recording if you want to share it with anyone else or know anyone who wasn't able to join us live today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.